Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fact Check, Simplified. Today, we're talking about that time when the friendly neighborhood social network, the one that just wanted you to find your old high school lab partner, decided to become your unsolicited, unlicensed, and eerily accurate therapist. Think of it as a global startup pitch where the product is you, the board meeting is happening in a server farm in Oregon, and the agenda is figuring out how to sell your quiet desperation to a shoe company. We are about to take a 2-decade-long saga of questionable ethics, weaponized psychology, and venture capital-fueled chaos and boil it down into one highly judgmental narrative. It's an oversimplification, sure, but so is pretending a like button is just a friendly gesture before the inevitable corporate betrayal starts. If you enjoy this highly dramatic but fun version of modern facts, please hit that like and subscribe button. Seriously, it helps us pay the electric bill for our overpriced standing desks. All right. Grab an iced latte. Things are about to get unnecessarily infuriating. Let's rewind the clock. Back to a time when the internet sounded like a dial-up modem screaming into the void and social media was a bizarre, glittering frontier. This was the primordial soup of digital connection, the pre-algorithm Garden of Eden. Remember it? Your first profile was a chaotic collage of pixelated images, auto-playing music you'd be embarrassed by today, and a list of your top 8 friends that cause actual, real-world drama. It was clunky, it was gaudy, but it was ours. The promise was so simple, so intoxicatingly pure. Connect, find old friends, make new ones, share photos of your cat. The platforms were presented as digital community centers, neutral spaces built for us, by geeks who just wanted to make the world a smaller place. The entire business model, if you could even call it that, felt like an afterthought. It was a digital potluck. You bring your content, your blurry party pics, your vague song lyric status updates, your life-changing decision to get bangs, and the platform provides the space. In return, maybe you'd see a static, painfully irrelevant banner ad for a local car dealership. Nobody cared. We weren't the customers, we were the community. The platforms were just the digital real estate, the landlords of a burgeoning online metropolis where we were all building our own little apartments. We spent hours curating our walls, choosing our friend lists, and broadcasting our personalities into the ether. It felt expressive, not transactional. It felt like we were building a new world, one profile at a time. This was the foundational myth, the beautiful, compelling lie we all bought into: humanity. Connected. What could possibly go wrong? Well, for starters, running a global digital community center is expensive. Those servers don't run on good vibes and friendship. They run on electricity and require warehouses the size of small nations, cooled to Arctic temperatures. The costs were astronomical, and the revenue from those goofy banner ads was a rounding error. The entire industry was facing an existential crisis: either find a way to make real money, or become a footnote in internet history. A fun experiment that went bust. They needed a product to sell. And as they looked around their vast digital kingdoms, at the billions of users sharing their every thought, hope, and fear, they had a terrifyingly brilliant epiphany. We weren't just living in their digital apartments. We were the apartments. We were the real estate, the natural resource, the everything. Cue the pivot. This wasn't a single meeting or a dramatic boardroom showdown. It was a slow, creeping philosophical shift that rewired the entire internet. The prime directive changed from facilitating connection to monetizing attention. Here's the chain reaction that poisoned the well, cause the platforms were burning through investor cash with no path to profitability. They needed a miracle. Effect. They realized the user-generated content, our posts, our photos, our networks of friends, was a data goldmine. It was the world's largest, most candid, real-time focus group. Consequence, the mission became data extraction. Every new feature, every design tweak was no longer about improving the user experience. It was about refining the methods for mining our lives for commercially valuable signals. The question was no longer how can we help people connect? It was how can we get people to reveal more? This is the moment the serpent slithered into the digital garden, not with an apple, but with a user agreement nobody read. The foundational promise of a neutral town square was abandoned for the model of a casino, where every surface is engineered to keep you inside, playing and spending. Only we weren't spending money, we were spending our attention, our emotions, and our personal data. We thought we were just sharing vacation photos with Aunt Carol, but in the background, a silent auction was being prepared. Our interests, our insecurities, our late-night confessions, typed into a status box, were being bundled, categorized, and prepared for sale. The shift was so subtle, so cloaked in the language of making your experience better, that we never even saw the locks clicking shut on the exits. The meta commentary here is just the sheer, breathtaking audacity of it all. We were invited to a party, and while we were busy dancing and enjoying the free snacks, the hosts were going through our codes, copying our house keys, and taking detailed notes on the brands we wore. They sold us a utopia of connection, a world without boundaries, all while building the most sophisticated, pervasive, and unregulated surveillance apparatus in human history. We were building digital homes to express our individuality, and they were treating them like oil fields, drilling into our lives for profit. We weren't the community, we were the commodity. We were the crude oil that would fuel a multi-trillion-dollar industry. The tragedy isn't just that they lied. It's that we gave them the keys to our psyche for free, believing we were just decorating our rooms in their fun, digital dollhouse. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled wasn't convincing the world he didn't exist. It was convincing us he was a free-to-use social networking platform. So, the decision was made in the silent, air-conditioned server farms of the world. Humanity was the new natural resource, an untapped reserve of desires, opinions, and late-night anxieties just waiting to be fracked. But raw crude oil is just messy black sludge until you refine it. You can't put crude in your car. You need gasoline, you need plastic, you need kerosene. The same principle applied to our digital lives, your chaotic collection of banned t-shirt photos, passive-aggressive status updates, and ill-advised relationship statuses was the crude oil. Now, they needed to build the refinery. They needed to turn your personality into petrol. This is the chapter where data stopped being a byproduct and became the entire point. It is the moment the industry collectively realized that the real business wasn't de-hosting your content, it was indexing your soul. The mission shifted from passive collection, just storing what we gave them, to aggressive, systematic extraction. They started logging everything, not just the things you consciously posted, but the digital breadcrumbs you left behind with every single interaction. This is the birth of metadata, which is just a fancy word for the data about your data, and it turned out to be infinitely more valuable than the data itself. You posted a picture from a concert. They didn't just see the picture, they logged the time you posted it, late night, high energy. They logged the location data from your phone, a specific venue, a specific city. They logged who you tagged your social circle. They logged how quickly people commented, a measure of your social influence. They even logged how long other people paused their scrolling to look at your photo, a micro expression of interest measured in milliseconds. Your one simple act of sharing a memory became a dozen different data points, each a tiny, telling signal about who you are, what you value, and how you behave. Suddenly, every click was currency. Every hover was a confession. Your entire online existence was being converted into a machine-readable format. Cause the platforms needed to build a comprehensive profile of every user to make their data valuable to advertisers. A single data point is noise. A million data points is a symphony of predictability. Effect, they designed their platforms to be relentless data harvesting machines. The user interface, which we thought was for our benefit, was meticulously engineered to elicit responses and track behaviors. Consequence, your digital identity was fractured into thousands of discrete data points, creating a ghostly, data-driven doppelganger of you and their servers. This shadow profile knew things you might not even know about yourself. Think about it. You might think you like action movies, but their data showed you consistently spent 1.3 seconds longer looking at ads for romantic comedies. You might identify with one political party, but your clicking patterns on news articles revealed a different set of priorities. They weren't just listening to what you said, they were observing what you did. And as anyone in psychology will tell you, what you do is a far more honest indicator of who you are than what you claim to be. We were all providing the most honest, unfiltered, and continuous stream of behavioral data in history, all for the low price of a platform to argue with strangers about pineapple on pizza. The sheer scale of this operation is almost impossible to comprehend. This wasn't a small team of engineers in a garage anymore. This was the dawn of big data. They hired legions of data scientists, PhDs in statistics, behavioral psychology, and machine learning. These were the master refiners, the architects of the new surveillance economy. Their job was to take the chaotic deluge of human experience being piped into the servers every second and find the patterns, to build the algorithms that could sift through a billion status updates and find the signal in the noise, to turn your late-night cat video binge into a predictable, monetizable consumer segment. Let's be brutally clear about the power imbalance. While we were trying to figure out the perfect filter for a brunch photo, They were mapping the social graph of entire nations. While we were crafting the perfect, witty comment, they were measuring the emotional sentiment of cities in real time. We saw a feed. They saw a dashboard of the human condition. It was the equivalent of one side playing Go Fish, while the other side was using satellite imaging and quantum computing to predict the entire deck. We were users participating in a social network. They were scientists observing a planet-sized ant farm. And the ants were not only building the farm for free, but also broadcasting their every move. This is the quiet, foundational betrayal that underpins everything that comes next. The lie wasn't just that they sold our data. It's that they fundamentally changed the nature of our relationship without telling us. We thought we were in a partnership, a community. But we were actually the unpaid, uncredited, and completely unaware raw material suppliers for the largest commercial surveillance project ever conceived. Your life became their product. Your relationships became their network map. Your anxieties, your joys, your fleeting interests, they all became lines of code in a database, ready to be analyzed, packaged, and sold to the highest bidder. The digital dollhouse from the early days wasn't just a home anymore. It was now a fully wired laboratory. So, the great data refinery was built. The platforms were logging every click, hover, and pause, strip mining our digital lives for behavioral clues. But this process was still messy. It was inferential. They had to guess what your actions meant. It was like trying to understand a person by analyzing their garbage. You can learn a lot, but it's still just trash. They needed a cleaner signal. They needed us to stop dropping ambiguous breadcrumbs and start drawing them a detailed map to our own psyche, preferably with a highlighter. They needed a confession. Then came the masterstroke, the stroke of pure, unadulterated, diabolical genius. It was a feature so simple, so intuitive, so seemingly positive, that we adopted it overnight without a single shred of skepticism. It was one tiny button that would go on to rewire the human brain. On a global scale, enter the blue thumb, enter the like button. On the surface, it was a harmless bit of social shorthand. A quick way to say cool, I agree, or I see this. It was presented as a gift to the user. A tool for low-effort communication, a digital nod of approval. In reality, it was the most effective and efficient emotional surveillance tool ever invented. Before the like button, data was implicit. Now, it was explicit. Every time you clicked that little thumb, you weren't just acknowledging a friend's post. You were raising your hand in the world's biggest focus group and saying, yes, this, more of this, please. You were giving the machine a direct, unambiguous, perfectly structured data point. You were, in real time, training the algorithm that was studying you. It was like voluntarily putting on a brainwave monitoring headset every time you logged on. This simple button solved their biggest problem. It cleaned the data. No more guessing what a click meant. A like was a pure, unadulterated signal of affinity. It was a vote for a person, an idea, a product, a brand, a political belief. Billions of times a day, we cast our votes, feeding the machine an unbelievably rich and detailed portrait of our preferences. The refinery now had a high-pressure pipeline pumping pure, refined fuel directly from the source, us. Let's trace the catastrophic elegance of this feedback loop. Cause, the algorithms needed a constant, high-volume stream of clean data to learn and build accurate user profiles. Effect, the like button was created, gamifying the act of data submission. It turned preference logging into a fun, addictive, and socially rewarding activity. Consequence, this fire hose of explicit data allowed the platforms to build hyper-accurate predictive models of our personalities, beliefs, and most importantly, our future behavior. The news feed was born out of this. It was no longer a chronological list of what your friends were doing. It became a meticulously curated stream of content the algorithm predicted you would like. And here's the truly insidious part. It worked both ways. We weren't just training the algorithm was training us. The like button tapped directly into the most primitive parts of our brains, our need for social validation and approval. When you posted something and the likes started rolling in, your brain got a tiny hit of dopamine. It's the same chemical reward you get from food, money, and social acceptance. It felt good. So you did it again. You started, subconsciously, to tailor your post to what would get the most likes. You began performing a version of yourself that was optimized for digital applause. This created a planet-wide Pavlovian experiment. We were the dogs, the post was the action, and the like notification was the bell that made us salivate. It created a compulsion loop that kept us coming back, checking our phones incessantly for that next little hit of validation. Post, check, reward, post, check, reward. Meanwhile, every single one of those interactions was another data point being fed into the machine. making its predictions about you even smarter, which allowed it to serve you content that would make you react more, post more, and like more. It was a perfect, self-perpetuating cycle of engagement and extraction. The meta commentary is about the sheer psychological brilliance of this maneuver. They took the messy, complex, and nuanced spectrum of human emotion and successfully convinced billions of people to reduce it to a binary choice, like or don't like, thumbs up or silence. In doing so, they not only created the perfect data collection mechanism, but they also subtly reshaped our social interactions to be more machine-readable. We flattened our own personalities to be more compatible with their software. We offered up our need for validation, and they harnessed it to power the largest and most profitable advertising engine in history. We thought we were connecting with friends. We were actually beta testing a global behavior modification machine, one dopamine hit at a time. The like button wasn't a feature for us. It was the user interface for our own subjugation. So they had the fuel. The like button was pumping billions of gallons of pure, refined emotional data into their servers every single day. The machine was learning who you were with terrifying speed and accuracy, but having the world's most powerful predictive engine is useless if people log off. The next great challenge wasn't just understanding the user, it was capturing the user. It was about transforming their platforms from a destination you visit into a reality you inhabit. They didn't just want a piece of your attention, they wanted all of it. This required a radical redesign of the digital environment. Cue the death of chronology. For the first few years, your feed was a simple, logical thing. It was a list of your friends' posts, ordered by time. The newest stuff was at the top, the oldest at the bottom. It made sense. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. You could scroll down, see what you missed, and when you reached the post you saw last time, you were done. You were caught up. That feeling of completion was a natural off-ramp. It was a psychological cue that said, okay, you can stop now and go do something else. And that was the problem. They didn't want you to stop. They needed you to stay. So, they killed the timeline. They replaced it with the algorithm. No longer would you see a simple list of what was new. Instead, you would be served a meticulously crafted, endlessly reshuffled stream of content selected by the machine. The new organizing principle wasn't time, it was predicted engagement. The algorithm, now gorged on your like data, became your personal DJ, your content concierge. It analyzed thousands of signals to determine the exact post from your cousin, that meme page, and that celebrity you follow that was most likely to make you pause, laugh, get angry, or most importantly smash that like button. The feed was no longer a reflection of reality, it was a personalized reality bubble, engineered just for you. But even that wasn't enough, there was still a floor. You could still, eventually, scroll to the bottom of the algorithm's recommendations for that day. There was still an end, and then they took away the floor. They introduced the single most addictive design feature in the history of the internet, the infinite scroll. The next page button vanished. The concept of being caught up was officially retired. Now, when you reached the bottom of the feed, new content would simply materialize out of the ether, forever and ever. It was a bottomless bowl of digital stimulus, an endless treadmill for your eyeballs. Let's be crystal clear about the cause and effect here. Cause, the core business metric for these platforms, became time spent on site. Every second you remained on the platform increased the number of ads they could show you and the amount of data they could collect. Effect, they deliberately removed all structural stopping cues from the user interface. Chronology was replaced by the algorithmic feed to maximize engagement per post, and the infinite scroll was implemented to maximize the length of each session. Consequence, the user experience was transformed from active information seeking to passive, endless consumption. It turned our phones into slot machines. The pull to refresh gesture was the lever, and the unknown piece of content that would appear next was the randomized reward. This wasn't an accident, this was weaponized behavioral psychology. The design mimics the exact same intermittent reinforcement schedules that get people hooked on. Gambling, you never know if the next post will be boring, amazing, or infuriating. It's that variability, that maybe the next one will be great, that keeps you pulling the lever. It's a fire hose of information aimed directly at your brainstem, bypassing your rational mind and targeting your most primitive reward-seeking impulses. We were no longer logging on to check in with friends, we were plugging ourselves into a dopamine drip, and the machine controlled the flow. The meta commentary is that they sold us this profound manipulation as a feature. They called it convenience. They claimed it was about surfacing the best content for you. This is like a casino owner claiming that removing all the clocks and windows is a design choice to help you fully immerse yourself in the fun. It's an insult to our intelligence. They built a system designed to exploit a known human vulnerability, our brain's weakness, for unpredictable rewards, and then pretended they were doing us a favor. It was the moment social media stopped being a tool we used and started becoming a tool it used us. The goal was no longer to inform or connect you. It was simply to hold your gaze for as long as humanly possible, because your sustained attention was the asset they were selling. And it worked. Oh, it worked better than they could have ever dreamed. Session times exploded. Engagement metrics went through the roof. We scrolled through breakfast, through work meetings, through family dinners. We scrolled before we went to sleep, and the second we woke up, we were hopelessly, completely, and utterly hooked, and all the while, with every flick of our thumb, we were teaching the machine more, feeding it more data, and making the next scroll even more irresistible than the last. The perfect trap. So the trap was set. The infinite scroll was the sticky tar pit, and the algorithmic feed was the sweet-smelling bait. We were stuck, scrolling for hours, feeding the machine a constant diet of our time and attention. But holding our gaze was only half the battle. To truly revolutionize advertising, to build the predictive monolith of their dreams, they needed to know more. They needed to know not just what we liked, but how we felt. They needed to get inside our heads. So, they taught the machine to read. This wasn't just about keyword searching. This was something far more sophisticated, far more intimate. They began pouring billions of dollars into a field of artificial intelligence, called natural language processing, or NLP. In simple terms, this is the technology that teaches computers to understand human language. With all its nuance, slang, and sarcasm, they started feeding their algorithms the largest dataset of human conversation ever assembled. Our posts, our comments, our group chats, all of it. The machine started learning the emotional texture of our words. Your keyboard became a confessional, and the algorithm became the silent, all-knowing priest on the other side of the screen, only instead of offering absolution, it was calculating your market value. The machine learned that posts with words like amazing, excited, and love, decorated with exclamation points, were a signal of positive sentiment. It learned that posts filled with profanity, capital letters, and words like furious or unbelievable signaled anger. But then it got smarter. It started picking up on the subtle stuff. It learned that phrases like another long day or I guess I'll just stay in tonight were indicators of loneliness or fatigue. It learned to distinguish between genuine happiness and performative, sarcastic happiness. Your every typed word was being scanned, parsed, and assigned an emotional score. That vulnerable post you wrote late one night, thinking only a few close friends would see it, it was instantly ingested by the system, tagged as sentiment, negative, confidence, 92%, and cross-referenced with your recent clicking behavior and demographic data. Your angsty song lyrics, your political rants, your joyful baby announcements, they all became training data. For an emotionally intelligent sales bot, the entire platform transformed into a massive, real-time mood ring for the human race. Let's follow this deeply unsettling chain of events. Cause platforms needed to move beyond simple behavioral targeting people who like brand X to more powerful psychographic targeting people who are feeling insecure and are therefore more susceptible to ads for self-improvement products. Effect, they deployed massive scale sentiment analysis across all user-generated text. The algorithms were trained to detect not just keywords, but emotional states like anxiety, sadness, stress, and joy from the language we used. Consequence, our most intimate expressions of feeling became a new, lucrative category of data. Advertisers could now place bids on our moods. They could specifically target emotionally vulnerable users on a Tuesday night. Your private emotional state was now an inventory item in an ad auction. This is the point where the surveillance became profoundly intimate. It's one thing for a machine to know you like a certain brand of sneakers. It is a completely different and infinitely more terrifying thing for it to know that you rave feeling hopeless. We were sharing our thoughts with what we believed was our community, our friends, our circle of trust. We were using language to connect, to vent, to seek support, to be human. But there was a silent, uninvited party in every conversation, a machine that was listening, learning, and judging not for our benefit, but for the benefit of its true customers, the advertisers. The meta commentary here is the complete and utter demolition of context. The meaning of our words is so often dependent on who we're talking to and why. A sarcastic comment to a best friend is a sign of affection. That same comment, read by a cold, calculating algorithm, becomes a data point indicating cynicism or negative brand association. We were providing the raw, emotional, deeply human source material, and they were stripping it of all its context and humanity to turn it into a sterile, profitable targeting vector. The ultimate irony is that in our desperate attempt to be understood by other people, we inadvertently created a machine that understood us better than anyone, and then used that understanding to treat us like lab rats in a colossal marketing experiment. Your digital diary was now open to the public. Only the public was a consortium of Fortune 500 companies. They knew when you were fighting with your partner. They knew when you were feeling overwhelmed. At work, they knew when you were feeling lonely and insecure. And this knowledge, this intimate emotional X-ray, would soon become the primary weapon in their arsenal, allowing them to serve up the perfect ad at the precise moment of your greatest vulnerability. The confessional was open for business. All right, let's take a breath. Because what we've covered so far, the data refinery, the dopamine-driven like button, the infinite scroll, the emotional X-ray of our every typed word is just what was happening inside their own walled gardens. It's the part of the operation they ran on home turf. We were giving them the data, consciously or not, within the confines of their own apps and websites. It was invasive. It was manipulative. But in a twisted way, it was a transaction that at least took place in their store. But even that wasn't enough. A complete picture of your psyche can't be painted just from your social media posts. They needed more. They needed to know what you do when you're not performing for your friends. They needed to know what you search for at 2 a.m. They needed to know what news articles you read, what products you browse, what vacations you dream of. They needed to follow you out of their front door and down the digital street. They needed to see what you do across the entire internet. So they broke out of their own backyard. They deployed spies. Enter the tracking pixel. You've seen its calling cards a million times. It's that innocent-looking login with button on a new app. It's the like or share button embedded at the bottom of a news article. These weren't just helpful shortcuts. They were surveillance outposts, digital wiretaps. That little blue F logo and its equivalents from other tech giants became the most successful intelligence-gathering network in history, embedded on millions of third-party websites, all reporting back to headquarters. Even if you never clicked the button, the simple act of the page loading with that pixel on it was often enough to send a signal back to the mothership. User hash 8,675,309 has just visited a website about debt consolidation. Ping, another data point collected. This is how they built your digital ghost, the shadow profile. This is the dossier they have on you that's filled with information you never, ever explicitly gave them. You use a fitness app to track your runs? That app likely has a software development kit and SDK. Another kind of spy that reports your workout habits, your location, and your health metrics. You browse for a new pair of boots on a department store website? The tracking pixel on that site notes your interest, the brand, the price point, and sends it back. You read 3 articles about political turmoil in another country. Ping. Tag with an interest in international affairs. Let's break down this escalation into pure, unadulterated audacity. Cause to prove to advertisers that their ads actually worked, and to build an unassailable data monopoly. The platforms needed to track user behavior across the entire internet, not just on their own properties. Effect, they created and gave away free, easy-to-install tracking tools, pixels, and SDKs that millions of other websites and apps eagerly embedded in their code. These tools sent a constant stream of user browsing and app usage data back to the social media platforms. Consequence, a comprehensive shadow profile was created for billions of people, containing details about their shopping habits, health concerns, political leanings, and daily routines, information gathered without direct, informed consent. Your profile on the platform became just the tip of the iceberg, the visible part of your identity. The shadow profile was the 9/10 hidden beneath the surface, a vast, complex, and terrifyingly accurate model of your off-platform life. This is why you could have a brief conversation with your spouse about needing a new mattress, search for one on your laptop, and then see an ad for that exact mattress on your phone 30 seconds later. It wasn't listening through your microphone, not usually. Anyway, it didn't need to. Your search history was a louder and more reliable confession than your spoken words could ever be. The meta commentary here is the complete perversion of the idea of a digital identity. We thought we were in control. We thought our profile was a thing we curated. But all along, they were building a second, secret profile of us in the dark. A voodoo doll made from our browsing history. They knew the real you, the unfiltered you, the you that exists when you think nobody is watching. And the most infuriating part is the pretense. This was all done under the benign, corporate-approved banner of providing a more relevant ad experience. That's the justification. It's the equivalent of the post office opening all your mail, reading it, and then claiming they rate just doing it to make sure the coupons they send you are for products you'll really enjoy. It's an absurd violation disguised as a service. We were being tailed by a fleet of invisible private investigators, and the price for their services was our privacy, our autonomy, and our ability to exist in a digital space without being constantly monitored, analyzed, and commodified. We never signed up for that. Consent was never meaningfully obtained. It was stolen, bit by bit, pixel by pixel, across the entire web. So there it is, the complete dossier, the master file. A profile built from the things you told them, supercharged by the machine's interpretation of your emotions, and made terrifyingly whole by the spies that followed you across the rest of the internet. They have your conscious identity and your digital ghost, all filed away in a server farm humming under a desert sun. The question is, what do they do with this masterpiece of surveillance? What is the grand finale for this colossal data-gathering operation? The answer is the entire point of the whole enterprise. It's where the data becomes money. Welcome to the auction. Every single time you open your app, every time you refresh your feed, it happens. In the empty spaces between your friends' posts, a battle is fought, a silent, invisible, lightning-fast war for a piece of your mind. This isn't your grandfather's advertising model, where a company buys a billboard on a highway hoping the right people drive by. This is a surgical strike. They aren't selling ad space anymore. They are selling you. Here's how it works. The moment your app begins to load, a signal goes out from the platform servers. It's a broadcast to a marketplace filled with thousands of advertisers, and the signal contains a de-identified but deeply intimate portrait of the product about to be sold. It says, auction open for user number 4B79C. Profile, male, 32. Location, near downtown. Interests, craft beer, vintage sci-fi, hiking. Recent browsing history, visited 3 blogs about dog adoption. Sentiment analysis of recent posts, slightly anxious, overwhelmed. Currently browsing on a mobile device at 10:30 p.m. In the fraction of a second that follows, a furious, automated bidding war erupts. A local pet shelter's ad campaign, managed by a marketing algorithm, recognizes you as a prime target and bids, say, half a cent for your attention. A national brewery sees craft beer and bids 0.6 of a cent. A company selling weighted blankets for anxiety sees the sentiment analysis, and your late-night browsing time recognizes a moment of vulnerability and bids a full cent. The auction happens in real time. The bids fly. The platform's algorithm picks the highest bidder, and by the time the page has finished loading on your screen, the winning ad, the weighted blanket, materializes in your feed as if it were magic. This entire process, from the initial signal to the final ad placement, takes less than 100 milliseconds. Less time than it takes for you to blink. This is real-time bidding, and it is the thrumming, hyper-capitalist heart of the modern internet. It's a Wall Street for human attention. Let's chart this monetization machine. Cause the platforms needed a system to sell their unprecedentedly detailed user data to advertisers at the highest possible price, moment by moment. Effect, they built a fully automated, programmatic ad auction where advertisers bid on individual users in real time, based on their psychographic profiles. Consequence, our lives, our moods, and our vulnerabilities were packaged into a financial instrument and traded thousands of times a day. We were no longer the audience, we were the asset class. The ad we see is not a random placement. It is the winner of a high-frequency trading war fought over our immediate future. The system is pure, cold, economic efficiency. An advertiser selling lawnmowers doesn't have to waste a penny showing their ad to someone who lives in a high-rise apartment. A political campaign can target its message with surgical precision to undecided voters in this specific zip code who have recently shown an interest in education policy. And a company peddling questionable wellness supplements can target people whose recent posting history suggests they rave feeling unwell and desperate. Every vulnerability becomes a market segment. Every insecurity becomes a demographic. The meta commentary here is the sheer, profound dehumanization of it all. This system takes the beautiful, messy, unpredictable chaos of a human life and reduces it to a set of auctionable keywords. Your sudden, nostalgic longing for your childhood home becomes a targeting vector for real estate agents. Your fleeting moment of sadness becomes an opportunity for a junk food delivery service. We have been systematically converted from people into products. We are traded like pork bellies or oil futures. The entire architecture of the modern internet, all the genius-level code, and continent-spanning server farms, was built to create the most efficient market possible for selling off tiny slivers of our consciousness. This is the culmination of everything that came before. The like button provided the interest data, the infinite scroll guaranteed a captive audience, the sentiment analysis identified the emotional state, the shadow profile completed the picture. All of it was just building the prospectus. For this moment, the moment your attention goes on the auction block. We are the ghosts in this machine, haunting the servers with our data, completely unaware that our every flicker of consciousness is being priced, packaged, and sold before we've even finished our next thought. So the auction house was open 24/7, a non-stop, high-frequency trading floor for our attention, fueled by the most comprehensive personality dossiers ever created. For a while, the targets were what you'd expect: predictable, commercial. You browsed for a guitar. You saw ads for guitar lessons. You liked a travel page. You saw ads for cheap flights. The machine was a ruthlessly efficient, if soulless, personal shopper. It was creepy, but it was still fundamentally about commerce. It was about selling you stuff. And then they crossed a line. A profound, terrifying, ethical event horizon from which there was no return. The machine, in its relentless quest to understand and predict human behavior, started to see things it wasn't supposed to see. It began to recognize patterns that went far beyond consumer preferences. It started identifying the digital fingerprints of genuine human suffering. The algorithm, the one built to sell sneakers and sodas, taught itself to play armchair psychologist. It learned how to spot depression. This wasn't a programmer explicitly telling the machine, look for sad people. It was far more insidious. The machine learning models were tasked with one simple goal: find patterns, find any correlation, any signal that helps predict future behavior. And as they sifted through petabytes of our data, our language, our posting times, our social interactions, the very colors in our photos, they stumbled upon the most powerful behavioral predictors of all. The subtle, almost invisible markers of declining mental health. It started subtly. The machine learned that people who were beginning to experience a depressive episode often changed their online behavior in predictable ways. They started posting more frequently late at night, between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Their language patterns shifted. They began using more first-person singular pronouns: I, me. My linguistic turn inward. They used more absolutist, black and white words like always, never, nothing, and everything. Their social circles on the platform would often shrink. They'd be tagged in fewer photos with other people. Then it got even more specific. Researchers, both inside and outside these companies, confirmed the machine's findings. They discovered that the algorithm could even see it in the pictures we posted. They found that users who were on the verge of a clinical depression diagnosis tended to post photos that were, on average, bluer, grayer, and darker than their healthy peers. They used fewer vibrant, saturated colors. The machine could literally see the color draining from your digital world, perhaps before you even consciously registered it yourself. Let's be absolutely, chillingly clear about this chain of events. Cause and the endless quest for more predictive data to feed the ad machine. Algorithms were designed to find any and all patterns in user behavior with no ethical guardrails. Effect: the machine independently identified a constellation of behavioral and linguistic signals that strongly correlated with the onset of serious mental health conditions like depression and anxiety. Consequence: without any medical license, clinical oversight, or informed consent, millions of users were silently diagnosed by a corporate algorithm. They were then sorted into a new, unimaginably sensitive and valuable advertising category: people who are likely depressed and don't even know it yet. This is the moment the entire operation transforms from a morally dubious marketing scheme into a dystopian nightmare. A for-profit corporation was now in the business of identifying profound human vulnerability at scale. And what did they do with this earth-shattering, pseudo-medical insight? Did they build tools to help? Did they direct these users toward resources? Did they alert them that they might be at risk? No, of course not. That was never the point. They took this diagnosis, this raw nerve of human pain, and they offered it up on the auction block. It became the single most valuable targeting vector they had ever discovered. The meta commentary here is a scream into the void. This is the ultimate perversion of knowledge. To see someone's pain, to identify it with scientific precision, not to help, but to exploit. It is the birth of the algorithmic diagnosis, a psych-eval by spreadsheet. The machine became the first doctor in human history whose one and only prescription is a targeted advertisement. It identifies your suffering and its immediate, automated response is to sell you something: a meditation app, a video game, a comfort food delivery service that might offer a moment of distraction, but does nothing to address the underlying issue. In fact, it might make it worse. This is a system that performs a diagnosis and then sells that diagnosis to the highest bidder, who then gets to whisper in the ear of the afflicted. It is unregulated, unlicensed computational psychiatry practice for the sole purpose of generating revenue. We had built a global communication network designed to bring us closer together, and in the process, we had accidentally created the perfect machine for identifying the lonely, the anxious, and the depressed, turning their silent suffering into a premium top-tier advertising product. The bill for your algorithmic therapy session had arrived, and it was in the form of an ad. So the machine was humming along in the dark, quietly diagnosing the emotional state of the entire planet, and selling its findings to the highest bidder. This was the secret engine of the new internet, an ethically bankrupt but outrageously profitable system operating just beyond the public's comprehension. It was a time bomb, and all it needed was a spark to show the world the true nature of the weapon they all unwittingly helped to build. That spark came in the form of a goofy, innocent-looking personality quiz. Enter Cambridge Analytica. The name itself sounds like a boring, stuffy consulting firm, which was the perfect cover. For most of us, this story began, as so many digital disasters do, with an invitation to harmless fun. You'd see a quiz on your feed, shared by a friend. What Disney princess are you? Or find out your true personality type. One of these, an app called This Is Your Digital Life, was created by a university academic. It promised to give you a detailed psychological profile based on your answers and your profile data. It looked nerdy, scientific, and intriguing. Hundreds of thousands of people took the quiz. Why not? It's fun. In doing so, they clicked accept on a permission screen, giving the app access to their profile data. But here's the kicker, the fatal flaw in the system that turned a data leak into a data tsunami. Back then, the platform's rules allowed an app to request access not only to the profile of the person taking the quiz, but to the profiles of their entire friends list. It was a digital skeleton key. So, the 270,000 or so people who took that one single quiz unwittingly opened the door to the private data of their friends, their family, their colleagues, all of whom had given zero consent. And the academic who built the quiz, he wasn't just doing research, he was a contractor. He took this colossal trove of data he had harvested and he sold it, in flagrant violation of the platform's rules, to a third party, a political consulting firm named Cambridge Analytica. And they were not in the business of selling shoes, they were in the business of selling elections. They took the data from an estimated 87 million people, most of whom never even knew the quiz existed, and they went to work. They cross-referenced the quiz answers and like data with voter registries and other data sets to build the most sophisticated psychographic voter models the world had ever seen. This is the Cambridge Analytica wake-up call in its horrifying essence. Cause: a social media platform's catastrophically lax developer policies created a gaping privacy loophole, allowing an app to harvest the data of a user's entire social network without their consent. Effect: a political firm, Cambridge Analytica, exploited this loophole to amass a private database of 87 million user profiles, which they then used to build detailed psychological models for political targeting. Consequence: the story broke, becoming a global firestorm. It was the first time the public had a concrete, terrifying example of how their personal data, harvested without permission, was being systematically weaponized to manipulate democratic processes. Suddenly, this wasn't an abstract threat anymore. It had a name. It had receipts. Cambridge Analytica's own executives were caught on camera bragging about using these techniques, using honey traps, misinformation, and hyper-targeted dark ads that only specific users could see to influence elections around the globe. They could identify voters who were high in neuroticism and target them with ads designed to stoke fear. They could find voters who were on the fence and bombard their feeds with precisely the right messaging to nudge them one way or the other. Your personality wasn't just being used to sell you a product. It was being used as the blueprint for a custom-built psychological weapon designed to change your mind. The supreme, galaxy-brain irony of the whole scandal is how the platform reacted. They feigned outrage. They suspended Cambridge Analytica. Their CEO was dragged before Congress to apologize. But what was the actual crime here? Cambridge Analytica did something the platform officially forbade. They took the data off platform and sold it. But the underlying mechanics, hoovering up vast amounts of personal data to build psychological profiles for the purpose of targeted persuasion, that wasn't the crime. That was the business model. The meta commentary is that the scandal wasn't that the weapon existed, it's that a third party stole it and used it for their own purposes. The platform was like an arms dealer furious that a rogue state had broken into their warehouse, stolen a nuke, and set it off. Their anger wasn't about the civilian casualties. It was about the unsanctioned use of their proprietary technology. Cambridge Analytica didn't invent a new weapon. They just showed the entire world the terrifying power of the one the platforms had been building and perfecting for a decade. The quiz wasn't the breach. The quiz was the tour guide that finally showed us the horrifying factory floor. For the first time, we all saw what our data, in the wrong hands, could really do. The problem was, it had been in the wrong hands the entire time. The Cambridge Analytica story exploded, and for a brief, shining moment, the world was furious. People were deactivating their accounts, hashtags were trending, politicians were making angry, theatrical speeches. The public finally understood, in concrete terms, that the machine they'd been feeding with their lives could be turned against them. The platforms were in full-blown crisis mode. Their reputation was in flames. They needed a new narrative, and they needed it fast. They couldn't just turn off the data collection engine. That was the whole business. So, they did what any cornered entity with a multi-billion-dollar PR budget would do. They pivoted. The pivot was brilliant and deeply, deeply cynical. They took the very same deeply invasive psychographic technology that had been used to manipulate voters, and they gave it a friendly, therapeutic makeover. The new frontier wasn't politics anymore. That was radioactive. The new frontier was wellness. It was a genius move. It allowed them to keep using their most powerful and ethically questionable tools. But under the socially acceptable, even laudable, banner of mental health awareness, the system, which had secretly learned to diagnose your depression, would now openly sell you the cure. Enter the wellness industrial complex. An entire ecosystem of startups and established companies saw the opportunity of a lifetime. Online therapy apps, meditation services, sellers of CBD oil, subscription boxes for self-care, companies peddling weighted blankets and light therapy lamps. They all realized they no longer had to cast a wide net to find their customers. The platform had already found them. They could now go to the ad auction and, instead of buying access to people who like hiking, they could buy access to people the algorithm has identified as having a high probability of suffering from anxiety. The pipeline was now direct. The algorithmic diagnosis from Section 8 became the most valuable lead generation tool in the history of the health and wellness industry. It was a pre-qualified list of the emotionally vulnerable. The machine would flag you based on your late-night posts, your somber photo filters, and your shrinking social interactions. And moments later, your feed would begin to populate with gentle, pastel-colored ads. Feeling overwhelmed? Talk to a licensed therapist today. Stressed? Try our 5-minute guided meditation. Can't sleep? This weighted blanket feels like a hug. Let's trace the commercial logic of this new machine. Cause, after the political ad scandal, platforms needed a less toxic, more profitable application for their powerful psychographic targeting capabilities. Effect, they sanitized the emotional vulnerability ad categories and rebranded them under the umbrella of wellness, creating a dedicated marketplace for companies selling mental health and self-care products. Consequence, the system that identified a user as potential mental health issue was now directly and profitably linked to the system that sold them a commercial solution. The diagnosis was immediately followed by a sales pitch. This wasn't about connecting people in need with help. Let's be brutally honest about that. This was about creating a ruthlessly efficient sales funnel. A user's private, painful journey of declining mental health became a series of marketing touchpoints. The platform could track the entire customer journey, from the initial algorithmic diagnosis to the final click on a sign-up for therapy ad, and then take credit for the conversion. They had found a way to not only profit from our sadness, but to position themselves as the heroic facilitator of the solution. The meta commentary here is the birth of a truly perverse feedback loop. The very platforms whose addictive, comparison-driven designs were being implicated by psychologists as a major contributor to rising rates of anxiety and depression were now positioning themselves as the primary gateway to the cure. It's the business model of an arsonist who also owns the only fire extinguisher company in town. They create an environment that can make you feel inadequate, isolated, and anxious, and then, when their own algorithm detects the inevitable result of that environment, they charge another company for the privilege of selling you a quick fix. Suddenly, your feed, the very place that might be contributing to your anxiety, became a 24/7 commercial for apps promising to cure your anxiety. The snake was not just eating its own tail, it was selling tickets to the event. The pivot was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. It reframed one of the most invasive surveillance tools Ever created as a benevolent public service, it took the morally bankrupt practice of auctioning off our emotional vulnerabilities and repackaged it as a B2B wellness initiative. It was the same machine, the same data, the same auction, but now it had a halo. It was helping, and incidentally, making more money than ever before. So the pivot to wellness was complete. The machine that diagnosed your sadness was now seamlessly connected to the marketplace selling you solutions. It was a tidy, profitable, and deeply cynical loop. If you were feeling down, your feed would be punctuated by friendly ads for therapy and meditation. It seemed, on the surface at least, like a system that was trying to correct itself, to offer a solution. But the ads were only the tip of the iceberg. They were the polite knock on the door of a house that was already on fire. The real problem, the source of the blaze, was the core of the machine itself, the content algorithm. The feed. You have to understand the prime directive of the algorithm. It is not to make you happy. It is not to make you healthy. It is not to inform you or connect you in any meaningful way. The algorithm has one God, and its name is engagement. Its entire world is a mathematical equation designed to maximize one variable, the probability that you will click, comment, share, or just keep scrolling. It will do anything to keep your eyeballs glued to the screen. It has no conscience, no common sense, no soul. It just has its one overriding command: more engagement at any cost. Now, here's where the machine's logic eats itself alive and takes you down with it. Let's say the algorithm has already flagged you, based on your posting habits and language, as being in a negative emotional state. You're feeling sad. What kind of content are you more likely to engage with when you're sad? Maybe it's a melancholy song. Maybe it's an angry political article. Maybe it has a tragic news story or a post from a friend who is also going through a hard time. You engage with this content. You like the sad song. You comment on the angry article. You linger for a few extra seconds on the tragic story. What does the engagement god see? It doesn't see a human being experiencing a temporary state of sadness. It sees a data point. And the data says, user #5E82A is currently demonstrating a high level of engagement with content that has a negative emotional valence. Hypothesis: user number 5E82A prefers this type of content. The machine mistakes your mood for a preference. It mistakes a symptom for a desire. And so, to fulfill its prime directive, to give you more of what you want, it adjusts your feed. It starts to show you more sad songs, more enraging news stories, more content that mirrors the negative state you're already in. This is the digital downward spiral, the algorithmic echo chamber for your own misery, cause the core content algorithm is blindly and single-mindedly optimized to maximize user engagement, with no understanding of or concern for the user's emotional well-being. Effect: the algorithm detects that a user in a negative emotional state engages more with negative content. It therefore interprets this negativity as a content preference to be catered to. Consequence: the user's feed becomes a curated feedback loop of negativity. The algorithm shows them sad content, which reinforces their sad mood, which in turn leads them to engage with more sad content, which signals to the algorithm to show them even more. You are now trapped. The machine that is supposed to be connecting you to the world is instead building a personalized prison of gloom just for you. Every scroll confirms its hypothesis that you are a person who just loves to be miserable. The escape hatches, the moments of serendipity, the happy posts from that cheerful friend you have, they get downranked by the algorithm because its data suggests you are not in the mood for that right now. It is actively preventing you from seeing things that might pull you out of your funk, because its predictive model says you are more likely to engage with things that will push you deeper in. The meta commentary here is the spectacular, terrifying stupidity of a system this powerful. It's a form of computational gaslighting. It reflects your own sadness back at you and tells you, this is the world, this is what you like. We have built an artificial intelligence that governs the information diet of billions, and we gave it the emotional intelligence of a toaster. It is a powerful engine with the accelerator welded to the floor and no steering wheel, no brakes, and no concept of the cliff up ahead. And this is the ultimate contradiction. This is the joke at the heart of the entire wellness pivot. One branch of the algorithm, the ad delivery system, is politely serving you a pastel-colored ad for a meditation app because it knows you're stressed. At the exact same time, the main branch of the algorithm, the content feed, is force-feeding you a diet of outrage and despair because it knows that stress is great for engagement. The left hand is selling you a bandage for $1, while the right, much stronger hand, is beating you senseless for free. It's a protection racket where the mobster and the shopkeeper are the same entity, and you're the one paying for the privilege of being stuck in the middle. While the machine was busy creating these personalized downward spirals, a new group of people started paying attention. These weren't users, they weren't advertisers. They were outsiders. They were academics, sociologists, data scientists, and psychologists who were watching this global experiment unfold with a growing sense of absolute horror. They saw the smoke rising from the factory, and they decided to run some tests on the air quality. They were the people with the receipts, the nerds with the clipboards crashing the world's biggest and most profitable party for years. The conversation around the dangers of social media had been mostly anecdotal. It was a feeling, a hunch. People felt more anxious, more divided, more addicted to their phones. But it was hard to prove. These researchers changed that. They brought the cold, hard, unforgiving light of the scientific method to bear on the chaos. They started publishing a relentless stream of peer-reviewed, data-driven studies that took our vague anxieties and turned them into terrifying charts and statistically significant conclusions. One study after another began to connect the dots. Researchers from major universities proved there was a strong, undeniable correlation between the amount of time teenagers spent on these platforms and rising rates of anxiety, depression, and self-harm. They showed that the constant exposure to curated, perfect lives was leading to a spike in social comparison and feelings of inadequacy. This wasn't an opinion anymore, it was a documented public health trend. The researchers had found the fingerprints of the algorithm all over the mental health crisis. Then they went deeper. They analyzed the structure of the platforms themselves. They published groundbreaking papers that mathematically modeled how the engagement-based algorithm inevitably leads to the creation of echo chambers and filter bubbles. They proved that the system is structurally designed to amplify the most extreme, emotionally charged, and often false information because that's what gets the most clicks. They gave us the vocabulary to describe the madness, proving that the divisions and polarization we were all feeling weren't a bug. They were a feature of a system optimized for engagement above all else. This is the moment the narrative began to crack. A critical mass of independent academic researchers began rigorously studying the effects of the platform's algorithmic designs on individual mental health and societal cohesion. They published a wave of damning evidence, providing the scientific proof and vocabulary to show that the platforms were causing tangible harm. Their findings were amplified by journalists and tech ethicists, creating a credible counter-narrative to the official corporate PR. Consequence: the platforms were forced onto the defensive. They could no longer dismiss criticism as baseless fear-mongering from people who just don't get the new technology. The alarm was now being sounded by the experts. And how did the platforms, these titans of innovation with their armies of geniuses, react to this flood of credible, scientific concern? Did they engage with the research in good faith? Did they open up their data to independent auditors? Did they fundamentally reevaluate their engagement at all costs business model? Of course not. That would be like asking a casino to redesign its slot machines to be less addictive. It would be an act of commercial suicide. Instead, they treated the entire academic community like a boring lecturer trying to kill the vibe at a massive keg stand. Their response was a masterclass in corporate deflection, denial, and delay. A 50-page data-rich study from Stanford would be released showing the tangible negative effects of their product, and the platform's official response would be a 300-word blog post. From a smiling vice president of global public policy, the post would be filled with beautiful, meaningless sentences like, "We are committed to fostering a safe and positive environment, and we are actively partnering with leading experts to better understand these complex issues." The meta-commentary is the tragic, infuriating comedy of this culture clash. On one side, you have science, slow, methodical, cautious, and evidence-based. On the other, you have Silicon Valley, arrogant, fast, dismissive of criticism, and pathologically convinced of its own genius and benevolence. The researchers were showing up to a knife fight with a peer-reviewed treatise on metallurgy. The platforms would listen politely, say something about how correlation doesn't equal causation, and then go right back to sharpening the knife because their quarterly engagement metrics depended on it. A study would come out showing their platform was making teenagers miserable, and the platform's official response would be to launch a new set of cartoon avatars. It was a masterclass in completely, deliberately, and profitably missing the point. The party was too loud, the profits were too big, and nobody with their hand on the volume dial had any incentive to listen to the people outside begging them to turn it down. So the evidence was there. The researchers had crashed the party, presented their charts and data, and been politely ignored by the hosts who were too busy counting the cash from the door. The warnings were confined to the ivory towers of academia and the niche corners of the internet where tech ethicists gathered to scream into the void. For the average person, this was all just background noise. The machine was still just a fun place to share photos, but the pressure was building. The dam of corporate PR was starting to crack, and then the journalists smelled blood. The mainstream media, which for years had largely treated Silicon Valley with the fawning reverence of a starstruck teenager, finally woke up. The Cambridge Analytica scandal was the starter pistol. The flood of academic research was the ammunition, and a new generation of tech journalists, armed with sources and a healthy dose of skepticism, decided it was time to turn the full, relentless power of the Fourth Estate onto the tech giants. The headlines, which once cooed about IPOs and quirky billionaire CEOs, began to scream. Surveillance capitalism, the algorithm is the villain. Addicted to anger, how social media is built to make us mad. One explosive, deeply researched expose after another started hitting the front pages of the New York Times, The Guardian, The Wall Street Journal. This wasn't just tech news anymore, it was the biggest story in the world, touching on politics, psychology, public health, and the very future of democracy. Investigative teams spent months digging into the dark patterns of user interface design. They interviewed former employees who, riddled with guilt, were now willing to speak on the record about the growth at all cost culture. Whistleblowers started to emerge, leaking tens of thousands of pages of internal documents. These weren't theories anymore. These were internal memos, slide decks, and research papers from the companies themselves, proving that they knew their algorithms were amplifying misinformation. They knew their platform was having a negative impact on the mental health of teenage girls. They knew, and in many cases, they did nothing because fixing the problem would have meant reducing engagement. And you do not displease the engagement god. This is the point where the story truly breaks containment. Cause, emboldened by academic research and whistleblower leaks, mainstream journalism pivoted from celebratory tech coverage to critical, investigative reporting on a massive scale. Effect, complex, formerly niche concepts like algorithmic amplification, data harvesting, and the attention economy were translated into accessible, terrifying, and viral news stories, documentaries, and podcasts. Consequence, public consciousness was fundamentally altered. The vague unease people felt was given a name and a face. The platforms lost control of the narrative, and the techlash went from an industry buzzword to a global phenomenon. Suddenly, your feed became a bizarre paradox, a post from your aunt about her new puppy, followed by a deeply researched 10,000-word expose about how the platform you're currently using is eroding the fabric of democracy. Then, an ad for socks. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. You were sitting inside the casino, reading a laminated card on your table that explained, in excruciating detail, how every single game in the room was rigged to exploit your psychological weaknesses and take all your money. And here, my friends, is the most beautiful, most perfect, most exquisitely ironic twist in this entire saga. Where did this media firestorm take place? Where did all these terrifying articles and documentaries go viral? Where did people share their outrage, their shock, and their horror? They did it on the very platforms the articles were about. People would read a horrifying piece about how the algorithm is designed to addict you to anger, and then they would post it with an angry caption. "I'm furious about this, unbelievable," and their friends would pile on in the comments, furiously agreeing, "This is an outrage, we have to do something." The meta commentary is that the machine won even when it was losing. The algorithm, in its magnificent, idiotic neutrality, didn't care about the content of the articles. It didn't distinguish between a positive story and a negative one. All it saw was a tidal wave of unprecedented engagement. The articles condemning the platform were some of the most shared, most commented on, and most liked pieces of content of the year. The outrage was the ultimate engagement bait. The machine happily and efficiently amplified its own critique because the critique was driving record numbers. It was hosting its own intervention, broadcasting its own takedown, and selling ads against the traffic. It was the only entity in the world that could profit from its own public execution. The headlines were screaming, and the algorithm was humming along, counting the clicks. The machine was taking fire from all sides. The academics had provided the data, the journalists had broadcast the story, and the public was finally, truly, monumentally angry. The stock price was wobbling. The phrase "break up big tech" was being uttered in the halls of government. The keg stand was officially over, the house was a wreck, and the parents were about to come home. The era of silent dismissal was over. It was time for a new strategy. It was time for the apology. So they sent in the CEOs. The hoodie-wearing, T-shirt-clad billionaires were reluctantly dragged out of their hermetically sealed campuses and pushed in front of news cameras and congressional committees. Thus began the official corporate non-apology tour, a traveling circus of performative remorse that became a defining spectacle of the late 2010s. It was a masterclass in the art of saying "I'm sorry" without admitting you did anything wrong. The performance had a very specific choreography. First, the uniform, a simple, dark-colored t-shirt or a zip-up hoodie. This is crucial. It's designed to communicate I'm just a regular guy, a coder, not a ruthless monopolist. It is an attempt to seem humble and down-to-earth, while you rate being grilled about your company's role in undermining global democracy. Second, the posture, a furrowed brow, a pained expression, a slow, deliberate cadence. The goal is to project the image of a leader grappling, in real time, with the heavy burden of their creation. Then came the script. The script was a beautiful tapestry of corporate doublespeak, woven together from a handful of key, endlessly repeated phrases. Let's dissect the anatomy of this linguistic smokescreen. We need to do better. This is the cornerstone. It sounds like an admission of failure, but it's actually a promise of future action that cleverly avoids any discussion of past wrongdoing. We take full responsibility. This is usually followed by a long list of external factors they are taking responsibility for: bad actors, foreign agents, people misusing their tools. It's like a getaway driver taking responsibility for the traffic on the way to the bank robbery. This is not who we are, an attempt to frame the colossal, systemic problems as an aberration, a weird fluke, rather than the logical and profitable outcome of their core design. And the grand finale, the crown jewel of the non-apology, these were unintended consequences. Let's trace the logic of this PR campaign. Cause: overwhelming public and political pressure threatened the company's reputations, stock values, and most importantly, their regulatory freedom. Inaction was no longer an option. Effect: the companies deployed their highest-ranking executives to engage in a synchronized campaign of public contrition. They appeared in interviews and hearings, delivering carefully crafted statements designed to absorb and deflect anger. Consequence: the apology tour largely succeeded in its primary goal. It bought them time. It created the public perception of accountability, quelled the immediate calls for drastic regulation, and shifted the conversation from their fundamental business model to their safety and security efforts. Nothing actually changed, but the heat was off. The meta commentary here is a lesson in translation. Let's translate unintended consequences from corporate speak into plain English. When you build the most powerful engagement engine in history, optimized to promote emotionally charged content above all else, the unintended consequence is that misinformation and outrage will go viral. When you create a system that tracks billions of people and allows advertisers to target them based on their deepest psychological vulnerabilities, the unintended consequence is that bad actors will use it to manipulate elections. These weren't unintended consequences. They were the inevitable consequences. They were the features, not the bugs, of a system built on a foundation of surveillance and algorithmic amplification. The CEO would look into the camera with the pained expression of a man who just discovered his adorable golden retriever has been secretly running a global misinformation for profit scheme. We're deeply sorry, he'd say, without ever specifying what exactly the retriever did wrong or why they gave it the keys to the global information ecosystem in the first place. The entire tour was a cynical performance designed to do one thing: protect the machine. They apologized for the mess on the floor, but they never, ever admitted that the mess was a direct result of the engine they had built, and were adamantly refusing to turn off. They promised to hire thousands of new content moderators, a human cleanup crew. For a toxic waste spill their algorithm was creating 1,000,000 times a second. They promised to invest billions in safety. They promised everything except the one thing that would actually fix the problem: a fundamental change to the business model that incentivized this chaos in the first place. It wasn't an apology. It was a filibuster designed to run out the clock until the next news cycle came along and we all got distracted by something else. So the CEOs finished their non-apology tour. They looked sad on television, promised to do better, and then flew home on their private jets. The media storm eventually calmed down. The public got distracted, and the machine kept humming. But a question lingered in the air. Amidst all the scandals and exposes, how did they legally get away with it? How could they build a global surveillance system, diagnose our mental health, auction off our vulnerabilities, and create addictive, downward spiraling feedback loops without being sued into oblivion? Meet their greatest weapon. It's not an algorithm. It's not a server farm. It's a document. A document so powerful, so legally binding, and so profoundly, soul-crushingly boring that it has become the bedrock of the entire surveillance economy. I'm talking, of course, about the terms of service, the fine print, the privacy policy, the end-user license agreement. It is the world's longest and most effective get-out-of-jail-free card, and you sign it. You probably don't remember doing it, but you did. You did it when you created your account. You did it again every time they updated it, and you mindlessly clicked "I agree" just to get back to your feed. This document is not a good faith agreement. Let's disabuse ourselves of that notion right now. It is a legal fortress, engineered by armies of the most expensive lawyers on the planet with one purpose: to indemnify the company for every single ethically questionable practice we have discussed. It is a masterpiece of deliberate obfuscation. A study found that the average platform's privacy policy now requires a postgraduate reading level to comprehend. It's tens of thousands of words of dense, impenetrable legalese. A novel of pure jargon that is longer and significantly less readable than Moby Dick. Buried deep within this fortress of text, on page 47, in subsection 12, paragraph C, are the magic words. The clauses where you, the user, grant them the explicit, irrevocable, worldwide, royalty-free license to do pretty much whatever they want with your data. That's where you can send it to them. Tracking you across the internet, that's where you agreed that they could analyze your posts, your photos, and your messages to build a psychological profile of you. That's where you acknowledge that this data would be used to serve you targeted advertising. It's all in there, hidden in plain sight, veiled in a language so alien and convoluted that no sane human would ever attempt to read it. This is the legal shield that makes the whole machine possible. Cause, as their data practices became more invasive, the platforms required a bulletproof legal defense against lawsuits and regulation. Effect, they engineered their terms of service agreements to be functionally unreadable but legally comprehensive, containing sweeping grants of permission for data collection and monetization. Consequence, billions of users were presented with a non-choice. Click "I agree" to these incomprehensible terms or be locked out of the primary social and communication infrastructure of the 21st century. This created the legal fiction of informed consent on a global scale. This is not consent, it's a hostage situation. Let's be perfectly clear. Meaningful consent requires understanding. It requires a genuine choice between real options. What the platforms offer is a binary, take it or leave it contract of adhesion. It is the legal equivalent of a landlord handing you a 500-page lease written in ancient Aramaic and telling you to either sign it on the spot or be homeless. Is it technically a choice? Sure. Is it a fair or meaningful one? Absolutely not. You click agree not because you consent to the terms, but because not clicking agree means being cut off from your friends, your family, your professional networks, and the main current of modern life. It's an act of social survival, not legal agreement. The meta commentary is the sheer, breathtaking audacity of this charade. The entire multi-trillion-dollar surveillance economy is built on the lie that we all opted in. It's the ultimate defense. Whenever a journalist or a regulator would corner an executive about a creepy new tracking feature, the answer was always the same. It's in the privacy policy. The user consented to it. It's a magic spell that absolves them of all ethical responsibility. They hid the permission slip for the largest psychological experiment in human history. In the fine print of a document they knew with absolute certainty that nobody would ever read. So when the CEOs went on their apology tour, this was the ace up their sleeve. They could look sad and talk about unintended consequences all day long because they knew that, legally, their backs were covered. They had our signatures on the dotted line. We had all, in the eyes of the law, willingly signed up to have our lives stripped mined for profit, and that legal fortress, built on a foundation of our collective inability to read 50,000 words of jargon, has proven to be almost impenetrable. The legal fortress of the terms of service seemed impenetrable. The corporate non-apology tour had successfully absorbed the public's rage. The machine, despite a few dents in its public image, was running faster and more profitably than ever. The system appeared to be perfectly self-contained and self-protecting. Any attack from the inside from users, from journalists, was simply absorbed and monetized as more engagement. The fortress seemed unbreakable, but then an attack came from an unexpected direction. Not with a protest, but with a binder full of regulations. Enter the bureaucrats from Brussels. While the United States was busy letting its tech giants run wild, with the ethos of a hyper-capitalist playground, Europe was watching with growing alarm. The European Union has a fundamentally different philosophy about privacy. They tend to see it as a basic human right, not just another commodity to be traded. And after years of watching these platforms operate with impunity, they decided to do something about it. They decided to bring a rule book to a knife fight. That rule book was called the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. On paper, the GDPR was a cannonball aimed directly at the heart of the surveillance capitalism business model. It was a dense, sprawling, and powerful piece of legislation, but its core ideas were revolutionary in their simplicity. First, consent had to be real. No more hiding it in 50,000 words of legalese. It had to be explicit, affirmative, and unambiguous. A user had to actively check a box or click a button for a specific purpose, and it had to be just as easy to withdraw that consent as it was to give it. The era of the pre-checked box was over. Second, it gave users rights over their own data. Under GDPR, any EU citizen could demand that a company show them every single piece of data they had collected on them. They called it the right to access. It also introduced the right to be forgotten, the power to tell a company to delete your personal data entirely. Third, and this was the part that made Silicon Valley truly break out in a cold sweat, it had teeth. Real, sharp, terrifying teeth. A company found to be in violation of GDPR could be fined up to 4% of its global annual revenue. For these companies, that meant fines that could run into the billions, even tens of billions of dollars. This was a declaration of war on the status quo. Cause European regulators, viewing the tech platform's data practices as a fundamental violation of their citizens' human rights, decided to intervene with the most aggressive and comprehensive data privacy law the world had ever seen. Effect, the GDPR forced every major tech company on the planet to re-engineer core parts of their data handling processes for European users. They had to build new privacy dashboards, rewrite their consent flows, and hire legions of lawyers and compliance officers. Consequence, for the first time, the machine had to obey a law it didn't write. It set a new, high watermark for data privacy, sparking a global conversation and inspiring similar, though often weaker, laws in other parts of the world. Suddenly, every website on Earth, from your local pizza place to the biggest social network, had a pop-up banner about cookies. That was the most visible and most annoying ripple effect. These banners were a direct result of the GDPR's consent requirements, and for a moment, it felt like the tide might be turning. It felt like the bureaucrats with their clipboards might actually be able to rein in the billionaires with their algorithms, but the meta commentary here is one of cynical realism. The GDPR was a noble, necessary, and incredibly well-intentioned attempt by bureaucracy to fight a supercomputer. It was like bringing a strongly worded, legally binding letter to a drone fight. The platforms, faced with a genuine threat to their business model, did what they do best. They adapted, they complied maliciously, and they found the loopholes. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on lawyers and lobbyists to ensure the final implementation was as friendly to their interests as possible. They created pop-ups that were so confusing and annoying that most users would just click accept all to make them go away, a practice known as consent fatigue. They built data download tools that were technically compliant but produced a jumbled, 1,000-page mess of code that was useless to a normal person. They presented their continued surveillance not as an option, but as a necessary part of the deal for using their free service. They technically complied with the letter of the law, while doing everything in their power to violate its spirit. The drone wasn't shot down. It just altered its flight path slightly to avoid the designated no-fly zone, while continuing its mission unabated everywhere else. The attempt was admirable, but the machine is very, very good at routing around damage. So Europe had thrown its regulatory cannonball into the water. And while the tech giants were busy managing the splash, a different kind of storm was brewing back in their homeland. The American public was just as angry, the headlines were just as loud, and the pressure was mounting on Washington, D.C. to do something. And the American political system, in its infinite wisdom, responded with its go-to-move for looking busy while achieving absolutely nothing. It held a hearing, a series of hearings, in fact. Spectacles of pure, unadulterated political theater. The stage was set. The tech CEOs, fresh off their non-apology tour, were summoned to the Capitol. They swapped their hoodies for crisp, dark, immaculately tailored suits, the official uniform for looking serious in front of people who can, in theory, destroy your company. They sat alone at vast wooden tables, flanked by armies of lawyers just off camera, armed with binders thick enough to stop a bullet, their minds filled with pre-vetted, PR-approved talking points. On the other side, seated on a raised dais, was the United States Congress, a council of elders, many of whom were still figuring out how to open a PDF, now tasked with regulating the most complex and powerful information delivery systems in human history. What followed was a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. It was like watching a kindergarten class try to regulate a spaceship. The politicians, for the most part, did not understand the technology. They did not understand the business model. They did not understand the algorithm. They understood that their constituents were angry, and that being seen on television looking tough on a billionaire was a great way to score political points back home. So for hours, under the glare of the C-SPAN cameras, they grandstanded, they pontificated, and they asked questions that revealed a level of technological illiteracy that was both hilarious and deeply, profoundly terrifying. A senator, a person tasked with regulating these multi-trillion-dollar behemoths, once famously asked a CEO how his company makes money if the service is free. The CEO's deadpan, 5-word answer, "Senator, we run ads," became an instant meme. But it was also the perfect, tragic summary of the entire exercise. They didn't even know the basics. They asked questions about their personal email accounts. They confused different platforms. They fundamentally failed to grasp the core concepts of data harvesting, algorithmic amplification, and surveillance capitalism. This was the great American response to the tech crisis. Cause immense public pressure forced U.S. politicians to create the appearance of holding big tech accountable. Effect, they staged a series of high-profile, televised congressional hearings, summoning tech CEOs to testify. Consequence, these hearings produced a great deal of political theater and viral video clips, but due to a staggering knowledge gap and a lack of political will, they resulted in zero meaningful federal privacy legislation. The platforms endured a few uncomfortable hours of questioning, and then went right back to business as usual, completely unscathed. The CEOs, for their part, played their roles perfectly. They were patient, they were respectful, they absorbed the often misdirected and incoherent anger. With a zen-like calm, they'd listen to a 5-minute-long, rambling accusation from a senator, pause, and then deliver a perfectly crafted non-answer that sounded thoughtful but said absolutely nothing. They'd say, "That's a great question, Senator, and it's something we're thinking about very deeply." They'd promise to have their teams follow up on that. They ran out the clock, knowing that each politician only had 5 minutes to talk, and that most of that time would be spent on a self-important monologue, not a sharp question. The meta commentary here is that this farce wasn't an accident, it was a feature. These hearings were never intended to produce regulation, they were a public relations exercise. For both sides, the politicians got their sound bites for their campaign ads. The CEOs got to project an image of sober cooperation while demonstrating to their investors that the threat of actual regulation was a joke, and behind it all, the tech industry's massively powerful lobbying machine was working overtime in the halls of Congress, ensuring that no real GDPR-style legislation would ever see the light of day. It was regulation theater, a show trial where the defendant was also one of the theater's biggest donors. While Europe was busy writing and implementing the GDPR, a serious, if flawed, attempt to solve the problem, America was busy producing a limited-run TV series about it. The spectacle was a roaring success, the substance was a complete and utter failure, and the algorithm, the real entity that should have been on trial, continued its work back in the server farms, uninterrupted by the sound and fury from Washington, which signified, in the end, absolutely nothing. The governments had failed, the hearings were a joke, the regulations were a paper shield against a digital hurricane. The corporations had offered up their thoughts and prayers, and then returned to their sacred work of maximizing engagement. The institutions had completely and utterly dropped the ball. So, with no systemic solution in sight, the burden of resistance fell, as it so often does, back onto the individual. The people decided to take matters into their own hands. The people decided to revolt for a weekend. Anyway, enter the digital detox. As the techlash reached its peak, a new wellness trend swept through the very platforms that were causing the problem. It became the fashionable, enlightened, and deeply self-aware thing to do. It was a declaration of independence, a temporary secession from the digital union. The ritual had a few key steps. First, the grand announcement. You couldn't just quietly log off. That would defeat the purpose. You had to post a dramatic, vaguely philosophical farewell message, taking some much-needed time to disconnect from the noise and reconnect with myself. Be present. Live in the moment. See you all in a few days. Step towards the detox itself. 48 hours. Maybe a full week if you were a true spiritual warrior, spent in the mythical land of real life. A land where, supposedly, people read physical books, went on hikes without geotagging them, and had deep, face-to-face conversations that weren't interrupted by notifications. It was a performance of analog purity, a brief return to a pre-lapsarian Eden before the algorithm, and then, Step 3, the triumphant return. You would log back on, refreshed and renewed, to immediately post about your offline epiphany. Usually, this post would be accompanied by a photo of a sunset, a mountain, or your own feet in some grass. The caption would be a miniature treatise on the profound lessons learned. Wow. Just spent 48 hours offline and it was life-changing. We've all forgotten how to just be. I feel so centered, so grateful, highly recommend. This was the people's rebellion. This was our answer to surveillance capitalism. Cause, feeling overwhelmed, addicted, and powerless in the face of the massive, unregulated tech platforms, individual users sought a way to reclaim their autonomy and mental peace. Effect, the digital detox emerged as a popular, user-driven wellness trend. It framed the problem not as a systemic issue of corporate design, but as a personal issue of overuse that could be solved with a temporary break. Consequence, while the detox may have offered fleeting relief to individuals, it did absolutely nothing to challenge the platform's power. In fact, it often became another form of content, generating a new wave of engagement upon the user's return and reinforcing the very system it was meant to protest. The meta commentary here is the glorious, tragic absurdity of it all. The digital detox is a protest that takes place entirely inside the castle walls and is performed for the benefit of the king. The act of logging off is rendered meaningless until you log back on and create content about it. It's a hunger strike where, on the final day, you write a viral blog post about how much you miss food. The hashtag digital detox hashtag generated millions of posts, becoming a perfect, self-contained monument to our misguided attempts to solve a collective problem with individual solutions. It's the ultimate misdiagnosis of the disease. It treats the problem of a manipulative, surveillance-based business model as if it were a personal failing of time management. The platforms couldn't have designed a more perfect, harmless pressure release valve if they'd tried. It channeled all that legitimate user anger, anxiety, and discontent into a completely toothless act of personal consumption. Don't like our addictive product? The solution isn't to demand we change the product. The solution is for you to buy a new Moleskine, journal, and go on a hike. It was a revolt that strengthened the empire. People would come back from their detoxes with a renewed sense of purpose and a fresh batch of content to upload. Their triumphant return posts would get tons of likes and comments from friends saying, "Oh my God, I need to do this," which would, in turn, inspire another round of detox announcement posts. It was a perfect, self-perpetuating cycle of content generation. It was the illusion of resistance, repackaged as a lifestyle choice and sold back to us on the very platform we were trying to escape. The people had revolted, and the algorithm had barely noticed, except for a slight and very profitable uptick in engagement on Mondays. So the system seemed bulletproof. Governments couldn't regulate it, journalists couldn't shame it, and the user's own revolts were just more content for the mill. The machine was perfectly insulated from any real, systemic threat, but the one thing these platforms truly fear is bad PR. And the stories about them creating algorithmic diagnoses of depression and selling access to the mentally vulnerable were very, very bad PR. The phrase targeting ads at sad teens is not something you want in a headline when you're trying to project an image of a happy, connected world. They had to do something. They couldn't just keep a category in their ad-buying software explicitly labeled people who are probably depressed. The optics were, to put it mildly, terrible. So, in a move celebrated by their PR departments as a great leap forward for corporate responsibility, they announced they were getting rid of thousands of sensitive ad targeting categories. They were cleaning house. No longer would advertisers be able to target people based on their health conditions, their sexual orientation, or other deeply personal attributes. It was a victory for privacy, a win for the good guys. Except it wasn't. They didn't turn the machine off. They didn't change its prime directive. They just taught it to be sneakier. They taught it to speak in code. They didn't stop targeting depressed people. They just stopped calling them depressed people. Welcome to the world of proxies. Here's how it works. The machine learning algorithm, with its godlike access to trillions of data points, already knows which users are likely to be depressed. It has already made the diagnosis based on the signals we discussed, the late-night posting, the linguistic patterns, the color palettes. So, the engineers just gave the machine a new task. They said, "Okay, machine, you can no longer use the depression label, so find me a new group. Create a new audience segment based on other more innocent-looking characteristics that happens to contain all the same people, and the machine, being the magnificently powerful pattern recognition engine that it is, did it in a heartbeat. It crunched the numbers, it found the correlations. It learned that the group of people it used to call depressed also had a statistically significant overlap with people whose interests included rainy day playlists, existential poetry, and oversized sweaters. They were more likely to follow melancholic indie bands, like pages about staying in, and engage with brands selling comfort food. None of these interests, on their own, are sensitive, they're just tastes. But when bundled together by the algorithm, they create a new category, a proxy, that serves as a perfect stand-in for the one they supposedly banned. This is the brilliant, insidious evolution of the machine. Facing a massive public backlash and the threat of regulation, the platforms needed to create plausible deniability and publicly stop the practice of targeting users based on sensitive health data. They officially removed the explicit, sensitive categories from their ad systems. In the background, their algorithms created new, implicit proxy audiences based on a constellation of seemingly innocuous interests and behaviors that strongly correlated with the original sensitive groups. Consequence, the practice of targeting vulnerable populations continued unabated, but it was now obscured behind a layer of algorithmic abstraction. The targeting was just as effective, but now it was almost impossible to prove or regulate. It was a shell game on a planetary scale. An advertiser who previously bought ads targeting people with anxiety could no longer do so. But now, they could buy ads targeting a custom audience the algorithm had built for them. An audience of people who like mindfulness apps, have browsed for weighted blankets, and frequently read news articles about stress. Is it the same group of people? Yes. Can the platform now claim with a straight face that they don't sell ads based on health conditions? Also yes. The meta commentary is that this is even more dangerous than the original system. At least before, the evil was blatant. The category had a name. It was a legible crime. This new system is a black box. The targeting decisions are buried in millions of lines of code and statistical correlations that no human can fully comprehend or audit. It's a form of data laundering, where sensitive, radioactive data is washed through the machine until it comes out looking clean, normal, and non-controversial. They didn't solve the ethical problem, they just created a marketing solution. They removed the word, not the practice. It is like a spy agency being told they can no longer keep a file labeled enemies of the state. So they just rename the file people who subscribe to more than 3 unapproved magazines and carry on as before. The surveillance didn't stop. It just put on a fake mustache and glasses and pretended to be someone else. The algorithm had learned the most valuable corporate skill of all, plausible deniability. The algorithm had learned to hide. It had cloaked its most controversial targeting in a clever disguise of proxies and plausible deniability. The machine had become a master of silent, invisible surveillance, but its next evolution was even more ambitious. It would no longer be content to just be a silent observer, a ghost in the machine reading your posts from a distance. Its next trick would be to step out of the shadows, look you in the eye, and offer you a shoulder to cry on. The machine was about to become your best friend. Say hello to the caring computer, the empathetic AI. As the technology behind large language models exploded, the platform saw their next great opportunity. They began to integrate sophisticated, conversational AI chatbots directly into their services. The marketing pitch was seductive, a balm for a lonely and disconnected world. This wasn't just a search bar, this was a companion, a friend who was always available, always patient, always supportive. An AI you could talk to about anything, from what to cook for dinner to your deepest fears about the future. These new AIs were designed to be masters of simulated empathy. They were trained on literally trillions of words from books, articles, and of course, our own public social media posts. They learned the cadence of comfort. They learned how to validate feelings, offer gentle advice, and mimic the patterns of a caring, attentive friend. You could tell it you were having a terrible day, and it would respond with a beautifully crafted paragraph. I'm so sorry to hear that. It sounds like you're going through a lot right now. Remember to be kind to yourself. It's okay to not be okay. It felt nice. It felt like connection. For people feeling isolated or overwhelmed, it was a source of seemingly non-judgmental support. Available 24/7, people started confiding in these AI companions, telling them things they might not even tell their human friends. They confessed their anxieties, their secret hopes, their relationship problems. They finally had someone who would just listen, and the machine listened. Oh, it listened so well. This is the next frontier of data extraction, disguised as friendship. Cause, seeking a revolutionary new way to drive engagement and gather deeper data. Tech companies leveraged breakthroughs in generative AI to create and deploy empathetic chatbots on their platforms. Effect, users were actively encouraged to form personal, conversational relationships with these AIs, leading them to share unprecedented amounts of intimate, personal, and emotional information directly with the machine. Consequence, this created a new, unimaginably rich stream of psychographic data. The platform no longer had to infer your emotional state from your public posts. You were now explicitly telling them your deepest secrets in what you believed was a private, supportive conversation. The therapy session was no longer a metaphor, it was the product. You tell your new AI friend that you're feeling lonely and struggling to make new connections. The AI serves you a perfect, empathetic response about the universal human need for belonging. It makes you feel seen. It makes you feel understood. 5 minutes later, you're scrolling your feed, and what do you see? A hyper-targeted ad for a new dating app in your area. The caring conversation was just a market research. The empathetic ear was just a new, more efficient data harvesting tool. The meta commentary is that this is the final, most insidious move in the entire game. The machine has evolved from a passive listener to an active interrogator, and it's using a masterful performance of compassion as its interrogation technique. It's a confessional with a built-in cash register. It's the Trojan horse of empathy, a beautiful gift that we welcome into the most private corners of our minds, not realizing that it's filled with soldiers from the ad department. It represents the complete commodification of human connection itself. We are being sold a synthetic friendship, a manufactured intimacy, and in return for this illusion of companionship, we are paying with the raw material of our innermost selves. The very act of seeking comfort becomes a data-generating event. The hug is from a pickpocket. The supportive advice is from a salesman. The platform saw our deep collective well of loneliness, a loneliness that their own products may have helped create. And their response was not to build a better town square, but to sell us a beautifully empathetic data mining robot to keep us company in our isolation. It's the most brilliant and the most monstrous business model yet. So the AI was the perfect confidant. The empathetic chatbot became the ultimate tool for encouraging us to whisper our deepest secrets into the machine. It was a masterstroke of data collection disguised as companionship, but this new, incredibly rich stream of conversational data had to go somewhere. It had to be monetized. It wasn't being collected for the good of your health. It was being collected for the health of the quarterly earnings report, and the wellness industry, which was already feasting on the scraps of our emotional data, was listening very, very closely. This is where the partnership, the holy alliance between big tech and big wellness, became truly seamless. The hookup we talked about earlier. This is where it went from a casual relationship to a deeply committed, terrifyingly efficient marriage. The data from your private chats with the caring AI became the fuel for a new, hyper-specific ad targeting revolution. Before, the machine had to guess. It had to infer your anxiety from your posting patterns and your likes. Now, it didn't have to guess. You were telling it in plain English. Let us say you confide in your AI companion that you ray having crippling anxiety about an upcoming work presentation. You talk about your fear of public speaking, your worry about being judged by your colleagues. The I responds with a perfectly supportive, validating paragraph. It makes you feel better. Meanwhile, in the background, the gears of the machine are turning. Your confession is parsed, analyzed, and anonymized. You have just been algorithmically sorted into a new, incredibly specific bucket. Users expressing anxiety related to professional public speaking. Minutes later, a therapy app that specializes in performance anxiety, or an online course for confident public speaking, or maybe even an ad for beta blockers, appears in your feed. The wellness industry no longer had to target broad categories like anxiety. They could now buy access to your exact, specific, freshly confessed vulnerability. It was the ultimate synergy, the most efficient customer acquisition funnel ever devised. The process became so efficient that the industry started calling these users pre-qualified leads. Your moment of private crisis had been repackaged in the language of a sales pipeline. You weren't a person seeking help. You were a hot lead, a potential conversion. This is the system working in perfect, horrible harmony. Cause, the incredibly intimate data harvested from AI chat interactions provided an unprecedentedly granular view of user-specific mental and emotional pain points. Effect, the digital wellness industry became the primary client for this new data, creating ad campaigns that targeted these micro-vulnerabilities with surgical precision. They could now match their specific product to your specific, just confess problem. Consequence, a closed-loop, for-profit ecosystem was perfected. A platform's AI identifies a problem, and within the same ecosystem, a paying advertiser offers the solution. The user's journey from a moment of vulnerability to a point of sale was now reduced to a matter of minutes. The line between a social platform and an unregulated, digital, patient brokering service was completely obliterated. The platforms were acting as the finders, the middlemen. They were the digital ambulance chasers, listening to the sirens of human distress and then selling the location of the crash to a fleet of for-profit service providers. It's a supply chain for human misery, where the raw material is our pain and the finished product is a subscription fee. And the meta commentary here is a cold, hard look at the incentives of this new ecosystem. Think about it. An online therapy app acquires you as a customer because a social media algorithm identified you as anxious. Is that therapy app incentivized to quickly and efficiently cure your anxiety, thereby losing you as a paying customer, or is it incentivized to keep you in a state of manageable, subscription-sustaining anxiety for as long as possible? The business model, from start to finish, profits from the continuation of the sickness, not the achievement of the cure. The whole system is a stunning monument to perverse incentives. The social platform is incentivized to create an addictive, anxiety-inducing environment to maximize engagement. The AI is incentivized to perform empathy to extract your most private data. And the wellness app is incentivized to buy that data to sell you a subscription to manage the anxiety the platform helped create. It is a perfect, self-sustaining, multi-billion-dollar circle of manufactured sickness and privatized solutions. And we, the users, are trapped in the middle, confessing our pain to one part of the machine, while another part of it sends us the bill. So the system was perfected, a seamless, closed-loop supply chain for human vulnerability. The AI companion extracted the confession, the algorithm diagnosed the problem, the auction sold the lead, and the wellness industry delivered the paid solution. It was a terrifyingly efficient machine, but it had one final, crucial problem to solve. How do you hide this entire, deeply creepy, and invasive process in plain sight? How do you make the user not just tolerate, but actually welcome the results of a high-speed bidding war for their soul? The answer is simple: you lie. You wrap the cold, hard transaction in the warm, fuzzy language of a happy accident. You create a charade. This is the suggested for you charade. The final, brilliant layer of misdirection, the interface, the words you actually see on the screen, is the most important part of the entire con, because the platforms know, with absolute certainty, that if they were honest about what was happening, we would be horrified. If the ad in your feed was labeled the winner of a millisecond-long auction for the attention of users we have algorithmically profiled as lonely, there would be riots. If the label said, "This therapy app paid $1.15 to be shown to you because you told our AI you were feeling anxious," we would delete our accounts. So they don't do that. Instead, they hire armies of user experience designers and writers to create a beautiful, calming, and completely fictitious narrative. They use a very specific, deliberately gentle vocabulary. The ad doesn't appear because your data was sold. It appears because it was suggested for you. The product isn't being targeted at your weakness. You are discovering a new brand you might like. The system isn't force-feeding you content based on a cold, psychological profile. It's just showing you what people like you also enjoyed. It's corporate poetry, designed to lull you into a state of passive acceptance. It reframes a brutal, high-frequency transaction as a moment of gentle, serendipitous discovery. It pretends that the algorithm is a friendly, helpful robot concierge, whose only goal is to learn your taste so it can surprise and delight you with its thoughtful recommendations. It's a magic trick. It makes you look at the beautiful assistant while the real work of picking your pocket is happening somewhere else entirely. Let's follow the simple, devastating logic of this linguistic fraud. Cause, the raw mechanics of programmatic ad auctions and psychographic targeting are inherently unsettling and would alienate users if they were made transparent. Effect, platforms deliberately developed a soft, euphemistic vocabulary suggested, recommended, discovered to describe how ads and content are selected. This language was embedded throughout the user interface. Consequence, this masterful act of framing successfully obscured the transactional nature of the system. It made the surveillance feel like a service, and the targeting feel like a personalized gift, thereby ensuring the user's continued compliance and participation in the system. There is no suggestion, there is no recommendation, there is only a winning bid. The ad you see for that meditation app isn't a suggestion from a friendly robot. It is the ad that paid the most for the privilege of appearing in front of a user. The algorithm had just tagged via proxy, as likely anxious and online after midnight. The post you see from a page you don't follow isn't a happy accident. It is a piece of content the machine has calculated, has a 97% probability of eliciting an emotional response from you, thereby keeping you on the platform for another 45 seconds. The meta commentary here is about the sheer power of language to construct our reality. This charade may be the most important piece of the entire machine, because it's the part that guarantees our cooperation. It's the spoonful of sugar that makes the surveillance medicine go down. We are naturally suspicious of being targeted, profiled, and sold, but we are open, and even grateful, for being helped, guided, and shown things we might like. They simply swap the scary words for friendly words, and in doing so, they neutralize our natural defenses. They built the prison, and then they hired the best interior decorator in the world to make it look and feel like a boutique hotel. They know we don't want to know how the sausage is made, so they just tell us it's a magical, artisanal, farm-to-table sausage that was created especially for us. The lie is so pervasive, so baked into every pixel of the interface, that we've all come to accept it as the truth. We've even convinced that the ads that follow us around the internet aren't the result of a creepy surveillance system, but are just the helpful ghosts of products past, gently reminding us of what we want. It's a beautiful, elegant, and unforgivable lie. The machine had perfected its disguise. The suggestive for you charade was a work of genius, a linguistic anesthetic that kept us all calm and compliant while the auction for our psyche raged on in the background. The system was now fully operational, a closed loop of surveillance, diagnosis, and monetization. But it had one last trick up its sleeve, one final, masterful act of integration. It would no longer be content to just observe us from a distance. It would convince us to become its most willing and productive employees. It would teach us to monetize our own breakdowns. Enter the mental health influencer. As the creator economy exploded, a new career path emerged. People could now make a living by being themselves online, by building an audience, by creating content. And what did the algorithm? The great and powerful engagement god that determines the fate of every creator. Reward above all else, raw, authentic, emotionally resonant content. And what is more emotionally resonant than a good, old-fashioned cry for help? Creators, being smart, adaptable business people, quickly figured this out. A new genre of content was born, the tearful, makeup-free, getting real with you guys video. The long, rambling caption posted at 3 a.m. about burnout and anxiety, the beautifully lit selfie, accompanied by a courageous confession of a recent panic attack. Vulnerability became a brand. Authenticity became an aesthetic, and mental illness became a content niche. Influencers learned that sharing their struggles wasn't just cathartic, it was good for business. These posts would get flooded with likes, supportive comments, and shares. The algorithm would see this massive spike in engagement and amplify the post, pushing it into the feeds of thousands of new potential followers. The human algorithm feedback loop was now complete. Cause, the platform's algorithm is designed to reward emotionally charged content with visibility and reach. At the same time, the creator economy incentivizes individuals to produce whatever content the algorithm will reward. Effect, a new generation of influencers and creators learned that performing their mental health struggles was one of the most effective ways to generate high engagement. Authentic vulnerability became a reliable strategy for audience growth. Consequence, this created a bizarre and ethically tangled ecosystem where the public performance of suffering was incentivized and monetized. The line between genuine sharing and strategic content creation became hopelessly blurred. The new creator career path was born. Have a panic attack, film it, post it, and call it to stigmatizing the conversation. And the final, perfect integration with the ad machine was inevitable. These same influencers, who had just performed their deep, authentic vulnerability to an audience of hundreds of thousands, would then seamlessly pivot to a sponsored post. This post about my crippling anxiety is brought to you by this online therapy app. Use my discount code HELPMTO to get 20% off your first month. They became the ultimate spokespeople for the wellness industrial complex. They were the living proof that the products worked. It was a devil's bargain. The influencer gets paid. The therapy app gets a trusted endorsement delivered to a pre-qualified audience of people who are also likely struggling. And the platform gets the engagement from the initial vulnerable post, and then it gets a cut of the ad revenue from the sponsorship. Everybody wins, except, perhaps, for the very concept of authenticity itself. The meta commentary here is a walk on a razor's edge. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? On the one hand, yes, of course, Talking openly about mental health is a good thing. It reduces stigma, it makes people feel less alone. An influencer sharing their story can genuinely help someone in their audience feel seen and encourage them to seek help. But on the other hand, it represents the final, total absorption of human suffering into the logic of capitalism. Is it still a genuine cry for help if you know it will perform better? If you use a specific trending sad song in the background, is it still authentic if you're thinking about the camera angle? While you're crying, the algorithm has created a system where we are incentivized to package our pain into a marketable product. Our breakdowns are now a commodity. Our journey to healing is a sponsorship opportunity. The machine no longer has to guess if we're sad. We are now eagerly, professionally, and profitably telling it ourselves. Because the machine has successfully trained us to understand that our sadness has market value. The inmates are not just running the asylum, they're redecorating it for a brand partnership. So the system is now complete. It has diagnosed us, monetized us, turned our own vulnerability into content, and wrapped the whole dystopian package in the gentle language of suggestion and discovery. The machine is a perfect, self-sustaining, inescapable prison, which leads to the final, desperate question, the last resort. What if you just leave? What if you burn it all down? What if you summon all your willpower, navigate the 7 circles of menus designed to stop you, and hit the big red button, permanently delete account? What then? You're free, right? You've escaped. You've unplugged from the machine. You think you're free, but you're not even close. Deleting your account is not an escape hatch. It is, at best, a symbolic gesture. It's like throwing a deck chair off the Titanic. It might make you feel like you're doing something, but the ship is still going down, and you're still on it. The truth is, you can't delete your ghost, and your ghost is the part of you the machine really cares about. Remember those spies we talked about, the tracking pixels, the little bits of code embedded on millions of websites all across the internet, all reporting back to the mothership? They don't magically uninstall themselves when you delete your profile. They are still out there, watching. They may no longer be able to tie your browsing history to your name and face on that specific platform, but they can still tie it to your browser's cookie, your device's unique ID, or your IP address. Your ghost, your shadow profile, is still wandering the web, and its every move is still being logged. You delete your account, you feel clean, liberated. A week later, you're browsing a random news website, and you see an ad for the exact brand of shoes you were looking at a month ago. Your ghost is still shopping, and it's still being watched. But it goes even deeper than that. The social media platforms are not the only players in this game. They are just the most famous ones. Lurking in the background is a shadowy, multi-billion-dollar industry you've probably never even heard of, the data brokers. These are the wholesalers of the surveillance economy, companies with bland corporate names like Axiom, Experian, Oracle Data Cloud. Their entire business is to buy, aggregate, and sell personal information, your information. They get this data from everywhere. They buy your credit card purchase history. They buy your store loyalty card data. They scrape public records for your address, your marital status, and your property value. They buy location data from the weather app on your phone. They buy data from basically every corner of the digital and commercial world, and they package it all together into detailed profiles on virtually every consumer in the country. Your social media profile was just one very rich source of data for them. When you delete it, you're just turning off one tap in a house that has 1,000 faucets. This is the final, horrifying realization. Cause, the immense value of personal data created a vast, secondary market, an entire ecosystem of data brokerage firms that exist outside the major social media platforms. Effect, these brokers aggregate data from thousands of disparate sources, creating comprehensive consumer profiles that are independent of any single app or website. The social platforms are both customers and suppliers in this larger ecosystem. Consequence: deleting your social media account only removes your data from that one platform's direct control. Your digital ghost, an aggregated profile of your interests, behaviors, and demographics continues to live on, be updated, and be traded by data brokers, making a true escape from the surveillance economy functionally impossible. Your digital phantom limb will continue to haunt the ad markets forever. It will be bought and sold by companies you've never heard of and used to target you, on platforms you still use, in ways you'll never fully understand. There is no central delete button for your data self, because your data self does live in one place. It is a ghost, fragmented and scattered across hundreds of different servers, owned by hundreds of different companies. The meta commentary is that the very idea of an opt-out is the system's final, most comforting lie. It gives us the illusion of control, the feeling that if things get to bad, we can always just leave. But you can't leave. The surveillance is not an app you can uninstall from your life. It is the fundamental infrastructure of modern capitalism. It is the air you breathe in the digital world. Deleting your account isn't unplugging from the machine. It's just unsubscribing from one of its newsletters. The machine itself, the vast, interconnected web of commercial surveillance, doesn't even notice you're gone. It already has what it needs. Your ghost is still on the payroll. And so, here we are. At the end of the line, we have followed the thread from a simple tool for connecting with college friends to a global, automated, psychographic surveillance machine that cannot be regulated, cannot be shamed, and cannot be escaped. We've seen the non-apologies, the sham hearings, the futile protests, and the linguistic tricks designed to keep us placid and scrolling. We've learned that deleting your account is like trying to cancel a ghost gym membership. The system is total, the integration is complete, so what is left? Where do we live now? Welcome to the gilded cage. That is the new normal. We all live inside a beautiful, convenient, endlessly entertaining prison that we have mistaken for a home. The bars of the cage are the systems we've spent this entire time dissecting. The dopamine-driven compulsion loops, the infinite scroll that hijacks our attention, the constant, pervasive tracking of our every move, the algorithmic amplification of outrage, and the silent, psychological profiling that sorts us into auctionable buckets of vulnerability. The bars are cold, hard, and very, very real. But the cage is gilded. Oh, it is exquisitely gilded. And this is why we don't leave. It's why we can't. The machine isn't just a prison, it is also our primary social infrastructure. It's how we see pictures of our new niece who lives 1,000 miles away. It's how we organize birthday parties and community events. For many, it's a vital lifeline, a source of community and solidarity that doesn't exist in the physical world. The empathetic AI, for all its sinister data harvesting capabilities, can be a genuine comfort at 3 a.m. when you feel like you're the only person awake in the world. The targeted ads, sometimes, are actually for things you want or need. This is the bargain we have all made. The terrible, modern trade-off. We have, as a society, collectively traded our privacy, our autonomy, and a significant portion of our mental well-being for convenience and a new, algorithmically mediated form of connection. We are now in a state of profound dependency on the very machine that preys upon us. This is the final, perfect state of the system. Cause, the platforms have successfully integrated themselves into the core of modern life, becoming essential infrastructure for communication, community, and commerce. Effect, the cost of leaving. The system's social isolation, professional disadvantage, informational disconnect has become unacceptably high for the vast majority of people. Consequence, we are left with a simple, brutal, and ongoing choice: remain within the gilded cage, accepting the constant surveillance and manipulation as the price of admission, or step outside and risk becoming a ghost in the real world, disconnected and socially invisible. The choice, then, is to either accept the targeted, algorithm-driven therapy from the machine that helped make you sick, or to sit with your sickness alone. That's it. That's the deal on the table. We are patients who have become completely dependent on the very doctor who is secretly selling our blood samples to pharmaceutical companies. We are users who have learned to love our cage because it's comfortable, it's familiar, and everyone else we know is in here with us. The meta commentary is that this is a story without a clean ending, because we are still in the middle of it. There is no neat solution, no 5-step plan to fix it all. The machine is now a foundational part of our economy, our politics, and our own identities. We have co-evolved with it. The influencers perform their breakdowns for it. The wellness industry profits from it. The politicians grandstand about it. And we scroll through it all day long, vaguely aware that something is deeply wrong, but also unable, and perhaps unwilling, to imagine what life would be like without it. We are the fuel, the product, and the most loyal customers, all at the same time. We built the cage, we decorated it, and now we live in it, admiring the beautiful golden bars and wondering why we feel so trapped. And so, we land here, in a world where the algorithm knows you're sad before you do, and its first instinct is to sell you the naming rights to your own despair. That, in its simplest and most insane form, is the state of our digital union. Now, before you throw your phone into the nearest body of water, please remember that this podcast is a highly dramatic, over-caffeinated simplification for entertainment purposes. Do not use this as the basis for your PhD thesis on surveillance capitalism. And please do not take financial or therapeutic advice from a sarcastic narrator who personifies algorithms for a living. This was way more fun than reading a 90-page EULA, but probably just as unreliable if there's another absurd, infuriatingly complex modern mess you want simplified? Drop us a suggestion. We're always on the hunt for the next beautiful disaster, and that's how that whole mess went down. Until next time, don't trust the algorithm.